The sun blazed low over the empty plains, stretching long, golden fingers across the cracked earth. The wind whispered through the tumbleweeds, carrying the scent of dry grass and forgotten dreams. Out there, where the land met the sky, rode a man named Clint Walker, a cowboy known only by the silence that followed him. His ranch, the Broken Spur, sat lonely and half-abandoned at the edge of Redstone Valley. The horses were thin, the fences sagged, and the kitchen had gone cold long ago. Clint had learned to live without company, without comfort, without love. That is, until the day a wagon rolled into his yard, and a woman stepped down with nothing but a suitcase and a determined look in her eye. Her name was Evelyn Rose. She was young, not much older than 30, but her eyes carried stories older than the West itself, stories of loss, grit, and something fierce that refused to die. Clint had hired her through a local posting at the Redstone Saloon, cook wanted. No nonsense. Good pay. He expected some old widow who'd stir stew and stay quiet. But Evelyn wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. The moment she walked into that dusty kitchen, she made it come alive. She scrubbed the pots till they gleamed, baked bread that filled the air with warmth, and moved like she belonged there. Clint didn't talk much, but he watched her, how she'd hum softly while the coffee brewed, how she'd pause to stare out the window at the fading sun, lost in thoughts she never shared. At first, the two of them were like strangers sharing the same silence. Clint would ride out at dawn, fixing fences and rounding strays, while Evelyn kept the house alive. Sometimes, he'd come home late, bone-tired, to find a plate waiting on the table, steam rising, a little note beside it, "Eat before it gets cold." He never replied, but somehow, that quiet act began to soften something inside him, something he'd buried deep after the war and the heartbreak that followed. But there was something mysterious about Evelyn. Sometimes Clint would wake at night and see her standing by the porch, staring out into the dark plains, as if expecting someone, or something. Once, he found her near the barn, tears glistening on her cheeks, whispering a name he couldn't make out. He didn't ask. A cowboy learns early that everyone carries their own ghosts. Still, he couldn't help but wonder who she was running from, or what she'd lost. One evening, a storm rolled across the valley, fierce and wild. The wind tore through the ranch, lightning split the sky, and the barn door flew open. Clint rushed out to tie it down, rain cutting into his face. Suddenly, he saw Evelyn out there too, struggling against the storm to save a frightened colt trapped in the mud. Without thinking, he ran to help. Together they pulled the little creature free, both of them soaked to the bone, breathless and laughing when the danger had passed. For the first time in years, Clint felt something stir, a warmth deeper than gratitude. Something alive. When the storm passed, they sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets. Evelyn spoke first. "You ever get tired of being alone, Mr. Walker?" she asked softly. Clint stared into the flames, his jaw tight. "Don't reckon I got much choice," he muttered. She smiled sadly. "There's always a choice. Some of us just forget we have one." Her words stayed with him long after she'd gone to bed. That night, Clint dreamed of the war, the smoke, the blood, and the letter he never answered. The next morning, he found Evelyn in the barn, brushing the colt they'd saved. She looked up at him and said, "Thank you for helping me yesterday." "You didn't have to." He tipped his hat. "Guess we both needed savon." She smiled, and for the first time, he saw light in her eyes. Weeks passed. The ranch began to change. The horses grew stronger, the fences stood tall, and the once lonely place began to hum with life again. Clint started talking more, little things at first, then stories of his past, his brother who died in the war, and the woman who left him when he came home. Evelyn listened without judgment. And in return, she shared pieces of her story, a husband who'd been killed by outlaws, a home burned to ashes, and a heart that never quite healed. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Clint said quietly, "You don't have to stay here forever, you know." Evelyn looked at him, her voice steady. Maybe I ain't tryin' to leave anymore. The wind fell silent. Somewhere deep inside, Clint realized something had changed. The woman he'd hired to cook had done more than fill his table, she'd brought back his reason to live. Autumn came early to Redstone Valley that year. The trees along the creek turned golden, and the nights grew crisp. Clint found himself whistling again as he worked, something he hadn't done in years. Evelyn had a way of making everything feel lighter. She'd plant wildflowers near the porch, bake pies for the ranch hands, and sing soft hymns when the day's work was done. But Clint could sense something stirring beneath her calm, a weight she still carried. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Evelyn unfolded a worn letter and stared at it. "You ever believe in second chances, Clint?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Reckon that's all life is, one long trail of second chances." She smiled faintly, then handed him the letter. It was addressed to someone named Jake Rose. "My husband," she said. "They said he was killed 3 years ago by the Dalton gang. But this letter came last week. He's alive." Clint's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. "You're leavin'," he said finally. She looked down. "I have to know. If he's alive, I can't stay here pretendin'." Clint nodded slowly, fighting the ache in his throat. "Then you do what you gotta do, Evelyn." The next morning, she packed her things. Clint helped her hitch the wagon, both silent. Just before she climbed up, she turned to him. "You saved me, Clint. Not from the past, but from forgettin' how to live. I'll never forget that." He tipped his hat, his voice low. "You saved me first." Days turned into weeks. The ranch felt empty again. The coffee tasted bitter, the nights longer. Clint threw himself into work, trying to fill the silence she left behind. Then one evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, a wagon appeared on the ridge. Clint's heart stopped. Evelyn stepped down, dust on her boots, tears in her eyes. "Jake's gone," she said simply. "He was dyin' when he wrote that letter. He just wanted me to know he loved me till the end. I found his grave by the river." Clint walked toward her slowly. "Then why'd you come back?" he asked. She looked up, her voice breaking. "Because home ain't where you're from. It's where you're needed." In that moment, something broke open between them, not a confession, but an understanding deeper than words. Clint took her hand, rough and calloused, and said, "Then welcome home, Miss Rose." From that day on, the broken spur was never lonely again. Evelyn and Clint worked side by side, rebuilding the ranch, and themselves. The horses ran strong, the fires burned warm, and laughter filled the kitchen once more. And sometimes, when the stars shone bright over the valley, Clint would look at Evelyn and whisper, "Guess I didn't just hire a cook after all." And she'd smile and reply, "No, Clint Walker, you hired a miracle." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell for more powerful Wild West stories that stir your soul. Because out here in the wild, every story reminds us, love can find us anywhere, even in the loneliest places.